Hello and welcome back to the Roboguide training. What I'm going to do today is focus on labs 14 through 16. So in order to do these labs, you need to have done 10 to 13 and have your shapes program ready to go, which is the one that traces a square, triangle, and circle. So before I start, I'm going to just make sure that program works. So there's my shapes program. Just going to click enter to bring it up, and I'll just test it, and this is what it should look like. It should trace a square, a triangle, and a circle. Okay, so what we're going to do in lab 14 is use some editing commands to create 3 separate programs, one called square, one called triangle, one called circle, and we're going to use what we've already got and just kind of chop it up and save it. So the first step is to go back to the select menu and take the shapes program and make a copy of it. And so we click options over here, bring up the keyboard, and we're going to call that one well, I'm using EEJH as a prefix so that all my programs end up alphabetically in the same place. So it's just a little trick. You don't have to do that. You can just call it square if you want. Okay, copy OK, yes. So then I pull up the square program, and all I'm going to do is just delete everything that's not part of the square. So this program comes down here, draws a square, goes back to home. So anything after that point I don't need. So the edit command, I'm going to click delete, and it's a multi-line delete, so whoops, what happened? Okay, let's try this again. See my message up here? Teach pendant is disabled. That's telling me I need to turn it on. Okay, let's try this again. Edit command, delete, and then what you want to do is cursor down through all the lines that you want to delete and then say yes. And sometimes students panic at this point. They think they ruined the whole program, but just cursor up and it's all there. All right, there's my square program. So if I want to test it, I can go out here, make sure it still works. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is create the triangle program. So back to select, go back to my shapes program, make another copy of it. Click keyboard. I'm going to call this EEJH triangle. Copy OK, yes. All right, and then I go into the triangle program. And so I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to get rid of everything that's not part of the triangle. Now, one thing I want you to notice when I'm doing this, I'm keeping the 2 commands at the beginning of each shape program. Anytime you have a motion program, you've got to call out what the correct user frame and tool frame is. Even if it's world frame, even if you haven't created a user frame 0 is world frame. So you still have to make sure that that is set at the beginning of the program so that all these points will be valid. If you don't put those commands in and you happen to be in a different user frame, you try to use the program. If I click on this point in this program, point 1, go to position, you notice it says user frame 1, user tool 1. That means it'll only work in that user frame and that tool frame. Okay, so now get back to what I was doing here. I'm going to delete everything that's not part of the triangle. So I'm going to start here, go to my delete, cursor down to just before the home, delete those lines, and then go down here and delete the rest of this. Okay, now I just have a triangle. Starts at home, goes back, does the triangle. Again, we want to make sure we test it, make sure it works. Okay, that looks good. Back to the main menu, select, bring up shapes one more time, make another copy of it. Oh, what am I doing here? There we go, I missed it. Copy, change the name to, this is the last shape, which is the circle. Okay, so now we go to circle and delete everything that's not part of the circle program. So delete again, cursor all the way down to here. All right, starts at home, draws the circle, goes back to home. Again, we're going to test it. There it is. Okay, next thing you need to do as part of Lab 14 is a little bit of an exercise using copying actual program lines and pasting them. And so we're going to go back, and it tells you to choose one of the shapes and do a paste of the motion lines in reverse. So I'm going to choose the triangle for that. So what I'm going to do is the triangle starts at point 1, goes to 2, goes to 7, back to 1. So that's 1, 2, 7, back to 1. When it goes back to 1, I want it to do the same thing in reverse. So I'm just going to copy this group of lines and then paste them in reverse. So the way that's going to work is you go to the copy command. You have to click copy first and then move the cursor to select the lines you want to copy. Click copy again. Now I'm going to paste them down here before home. I'm going to have it go do the reverse before it goes back to home. So to do, if I do a paste, if I just do a regular position paste position ID, it does the same program again. I actually don't really need this line here. I can just delete that. So 1, 2, 7, 1, 2, 7, back to 1. So, and we could do that. Let me just show you what it does. Does a triangle again. Okay, but that's not really what we wanted. What we want to do for the lab is to paste those in reverse. So I'm going to delete them, the ones I just pasted, and redo it and show you how to do it in reverse. Okay, we'll take the same lines. We'll do a copy. Move the cursor down. Click copy. Now, when we go to paste, we have a few options. Now, there was a presentation on this talking about the differences between logic and position ID. Usually you're going to use position ID because that preserves the point numbers, so you get the exact same points with the same point IDs. But there are some other options. Now there's a few reverse options. The one that's the best one to use for reverse is, oops, I went past it. Okay, let's try again. Reverse motion. So there's reverse position ID, and then there's reverse motion position ID. What the reverse motion does is it makes sure that all the same motions are preserved, so that if you have a linear path at a given speed, it does the same speed. So notice I have 3 different speeds. The motion from point 1 to 2 is going to be 200 millimeters. That means when I go in reverse, I want going from 2 to 1 to also be 200 millimeters. So if I choose reverse motion, starts at 1, 2, 7. Now I can delete one of these lines here, but then going from 1, 7, 2. Notice 2 back to 1 is 200, even though position 2 originally had a 200 millimeter per second speed. Now position 2 has a 100 because that's the motion to point 2 from point 7. So it does an exact reverse motion of the original triangle. Let me just do one quick thing. I'm going to get rid of that extra 0.1 line. It's just sitting there not doing anything. So there we go. So let's test this. So there's triangle. There's triangle in reverse. We're going to go to select, back to the main menu, and we're going to create a program, and it's called main. Here's the main program. This program is not going to have any motion commands. What it's going to do is call the three programs that we created. So the command to call a program, if you go to forward arrow down here, click the instruction menu, call. When you call a program, it brings up all the programs that you've written. So I'm going to call the square first. Then I'm going to call the triangle second, and that's the one that does the triangle in forward and reverse. And then I'm going to call the circle. So when you run this program, basically just the 3 shapes, just like the shapes program. It's actually, let me pull up the teach pen. It's actually jumping into each of the 3 programs, and then it ends up back where it started. Okay, so it does it once, but in the actual lab you have to make this loop, so I'll just do that. So what I'm going to do is add the commands at the beginning, a label and a jump, so it just keeps going forever. So in order to do that, I have to pick the insert command, insert one line at the top, and then the command I'm going to put there is just a label. Type in label 1, and then at the end, back to the jump label command, I pick the jump, put the label in, and now it's just going to keep doing the shapes over and over again. And it'll keep doing that until I press this stop button. Because it's looping, it doesn't automatically stop, so I have to hit the stop, which is the same thing as the abort. Another way to do it is on the teach pen itself, and when you're working with the real robot, you would use the hold key in order to stop the program and then do a function abort all. So let me do it that way because that's more realistic to the way you would do it. So if it's going around and around and on, maybe I'll just have it hold right there. And if I want to kind of clear the program completely, I hit function, and then the first option is always abort. So I just hit enter, and it doesn't abort all. All right, that is the basics on labs 14 through 16.